been lied on. But I'm still here. Thank you, Lord.
You guys hear me? Hey! Hallelujah. Hello, everyone. Is that loud enough? Turn the volume down. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good evening. And thank you, each of you, for attending this important forum. First of all, this is a forum. This is not a debate. This is simply a way to communicate to all of you what's in the Project 2025 plan. This document covers a lot of information, and so some of the information in the document you're going to agree with, and some of you will not. And so it's important for us to understand what is in it, and such we put together these forms. Now let's be realistic. This is Project 2025. This is 922 pages. And so we thought it was important to let people know what's in it in a very simplistic and simple way. And thus we're having these forums today. Now, before I go any further, let me ask the pastor of this great church, Zion Pilgrim Baptist Church, Ron Best, Reverend Ron Best, to come up and open us up in prayer.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, again, we thank you for this beautiful day you have given to us. We thank you for your spirit that abides with us daily. We ask now, God, for your covering upon this night, that this information that is shared will provide wisdom for all of us, that, God, we might be a better informed people. We ask for your spirit to abide with us throughout this evening, God, that you might get the glory out of that which is being done. We thank you for the participants who have come and give of themselves. We cover them now, God, with your grace, your mercy, and your love, and your peace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Before I go any further, be fair, let me also thank you, Reverend Best. I really appreciate that. And let me take this time right now to recognize our partners. And of course, the Zion Pilgrim Baptist Church. And you may say, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's a big deal. They opened their church up on a night they wouldn't have it open. They brought in their staff to make sure it's clean and cool, and AV is working, there's staff here, so we want to thank them for that, because this is a major deal to have a location to have this. We want to also thank the Mount Hedron Progressive Baptist Association, the Columbia NAACP, the Gethsemane Baptist Association, the Columbia Urban League, and also the Racial Justice Network. I'd also like to thank our ushers back here. We're going to have another one in a minute, but Valerie's back here. She's with the Wiley Kennedy Foundation. And Nicole should be here shortly. She's with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Will be our usher tonight, and I will talk to you a little bit more about them and what they're here to do for us. So importantly enough, as we approach this critical, and I would say emphasize this critical election season, it's essential to recognize what's at stake for our community specifically. The choices we make now will shape the future of our neighborhoods, our schools, our economy, and our shared quality of life. This is a pivotal moment to come together, educate yourselves, and ensure your voice is heard. Every vote is a step towards securing the future that reflects our values and aspirations. We need to understand the issues on the table, the candidates vying for our trust, and how their plans will impact us, especially those of us who are facing significant economic challenges and barriers to opportunities. Let us commit to being involved. We want everyone to commit to being involved, to be informed, engaged in activities and participation in the election process. Our collective actions has the power to bring about meaningful change. Your vote is your voice. Make sure it's heard loud and clear. We will never tell you who to vote for. You want to make sure you're informed and make the decision to vote for who you want to vote for. Now, we have assembled a group of, I think, fairly impressive panelists, and I'm going to read to you a little bit about each one of them. Now, I could stand here and read to you about them just to give them glory and just make it because the accolades, because they are impressive. They are impressive. But I want to do this to make sure you understand that we went out and found people who were able to talk to you intelligently and understand the impacts of this plan. They're a bipartisan group of people, but they're here to tell you based on their knowledge that what they think about the 2025 plan. So Ellen Jones is not here right now. She's on her way. But Ellen is a U.S. Army veteran. She is enlisted, and she also was an officer. She has a clear perspective of it all. She has a doctorate degree in healthcare management and leadership from Colorado Technical University, and a bachelor's of science in nursing from Austin Peay State University. She's also owner and administrator of a private duty home. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, give you what we're gonna do tonight. We're gonna give you a background of Project 2025, talk about the Heritage Foundation a little bit. You'll know why shortly. We're going to go through the pillars and the policies of that, the elements in 2025, and then we'll give you a summary. So without further ado, Carrie, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? All right. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening to talk about Project 2025, what it is, its potential impacts, and what we need to be doing going forward. As Ms. Gwen just told you, these are some of the main areas that we'll be covering. So next slide, please. All right. So what I'm going to talk to you about is really the background of this document and how it came to be and what it is that we're actually dealing with. So when most folks think about Project 2025, what do you think? What have you heard? What are your ideas about it? Anybody? Throw your hand up and share what you think. Yes, ma'am. Do you think Donald Trump? Okay. It's Donald Trump's book. Okay. Anybody else? It started with Reagan. Okay. Anybody else? All that and some. So it is true. This is a document that is posited as being Donald Trump's presidential transition plan for when he, if he were to reclaim office. But it's also more than just about any one particular candidate, right? So Project 2025 is the work of an organization called the Heritage Foundation, and I'm gonna slide this back just a little so I can make sure I see both y'all and the screen. But the Heritage Foundation is an organization, it's a 501c3. It's considered itself a conservative think tank where they work on the various policies and things that help conservative administrations, right? And what happens here with this organization, matter of fact, if you can go back to the previous slide, what this organization has been doing is that they've been working in the vineyard for a real long time. Someone mentioned that it started with former President Ronald Reagan's administration. That's actually when, if we can go back to, that's actually when the very first mandate for leadership, that's actually the official name of this document. It's called the Mandate for Leadership. Project 2025, I guess you can call it the colloquialism for the day. But they've been working these mandates since Reagan administration was the very first one where they put it in with a presidential administration. So when Ronald Reagan administration took office, then the very first mandate, which was made up of over 3,000 pages, I think it was, but it had 2,000 policy recommendations based on conservative ideas that were actually adopted and put into place. And so what we have here is we're on mandate 9. But if you go back to Reagan, the very first one was mandate number 1, way back in 1979 is when they wrote it, in 1980, 81 is when it was implemented. And each of those is based on this idea of 4 promises and pillars, but they come together. Over 150 conservative organizations have come together, working, putting their money together, putting their brain trust together, putting their efforts together to make sure that whatever the conservative view of how our government should function is what is put into place. And so, as you can see on this particular slide, it tells you that it has over 150 organizations working, 400 scholars. So you think about the 3-4 of us that are going to be up here working together to put something together. You have over 150 folks with PhDs, with JDs, with ministerial backgrounds, with business backgrounds, all working together to put together a plan that's based on ideas that might not be necessarily what's good for everybody. All right, we can go to the next one. So what we're going to talk about first and foremost is what is the Heritage Foundation? Again, I said it's a think tank, but it's a very, very active think tank. most times think tanks will focus on a topic or area of interest where they're trying to make sure that they are influential in that particular area. Their area of influence is bringing together all of the various conservative linked entities that are out there to help them with their role of, what's the phrase they like, getting rid of the administrative state. So the administrative state basically is our government, how it functions, all of the different parts of our government. Remember back in school, you learned that we had 3 branches of government, the executive, the judicial, and the legislative, and everybody has their roles, and they have their, we have these systems of checks and balances, so no one role becomes more important than the other. Well, the Heritage Foundation believes, and their partners, they believe that we should have a government that's concentrated around a strong executive, i.e. the president, who is able to make decisions and not necessarily need any checks and balances from Congress. They can definitely tell the courts what it is that they want to be done, and subsequently, they can make sure that whatever their vision is the one that's adopted and the one that's carried out. Now, one of the things that we found here with this Heritage Foundation and the works that they're doing is oftentimes the things that they advocate for are things that are actually detrimental to communities of color or communities where we don't have the influence, right? They have billionaires working together. And I think if you go to the next slide, we can actually see that. Whereas we have folks who are putting our pennies together to put gas in the car, to come and attend these type of things. These folks take their billions and they decide what it is that our government is going to look like, whose ideas are more important. If we want our tax dollars to go to public schools, then we can make it so that the tax dollars for everybody is going to go to private schools, And so what the Heritage Foundation has done is their mission statement, and the mission statement as shared by all of them, is formulate and promote conservative public policies. And so again, public policies, everything in our life is touched by policy. I don't care if it's the cleaner you use to clean your glass in your house, the Windex all the way up to the medicines that you might take. Everything is touched by public policy. There's someone who sets the policy, somebody who sets the prices, someone who says what can be in those products or what can be in that medication or how much they can charge. All of that is set by public policy. And so what they're saying is they want to make sure that only a certain group of people who meet a certain standard of thinking, a certain belief system, a certain worldview, are involved in developing our public policies. And one of the things they do, so they take their almost $500 million in assets, and they fund organizations on the local, the state, and the federal level. I don't know if you heard about recently, there was a group of students where there was a student organization that was having a very inappropriate roast of Vice President Kamala Harris on the University of South Carolina campus. And what they were saying was, this is free speech. That was the idea behind it. Well, the Heritage Foundation and some of its partners have been working to actually change the First Amendment and to ensure that the First Amendment protects hate speech, right? You want to make sure that these really nasty and vitriolic things that are being said are actually protected, so that you can continue to spread hatred and mean-spiritedness and nothing that has to do with advancing our public discourse. And so there are folks who work within their 150, there are folks who specifically focus on freedom of speech, is what they call. The reason they could have that event on the campus of the University of South Carolina is because a couple of years ago, maybe this is 2024, maybe 2022, there was this policy passed by one of their policy partners. The American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, is a model policy developing organization. What they do is they actually create various policies on different things. We don't like critical race theory, then we have a policy written and designed for you to take to your state legislature. So elected officials will take these model policies and then have them implemented at the state level. So with regard to free speech, there is the Higher Education Free Speech Protection Act, and I could be saying the name incorrectly, but this particular act that was signed is designed for, that basically says on public college campuses, free speech of conservative students are under attack. And so therefore, we need to protect their speech. And subsequently, no public institution can say, we're not going to allow this on our campus. Even if it goes against their student creed, their Carolinian creed, or whatever, they can't stop it because our state government has already passed a law saying that you have to do this. And so subsequently, this is why it made it very difficult. Even if the president of the University of South Carolina was disinclined to have this happen, if he had stopped it altogether, he was at risk of being sued for infringing on the free speech rights of that student group. Well, that student group is still suing anyway because people complained about the fact that it was happening. But this is the work of the Heritage Foundation and its partners. They're doing little things that they can dismantle what we have, the protections that we have, what we have regarding the regulations and things that make sure that, say for instance, a company doesn't set up in your backyard and then start polluting right there and everybody's sick in the community. You know, so laws and regulations, they want to get rid of those things and allow unfettered access to corporate interests, but also this idea of states' rights. They want to roll things back regarding states' rights. If you ever heard of that before, you might have heard it back during slavery. And the states' rights to have, hold slaves and things of that nature. Next slide, please. So again, so the very first mandate was published in 1981. Many of the policies that they gave to Ronald Reagan at that time were implemented, and some of them are still in effect today. For instance, when we talk about, I don't know if you recall the air traffic controller strike back in the 80s. Well, that air traffic controller strike actually came from Heritage proposals to weaken, labor unions and things in the country. And they also worked on these things called right-to-work laws, which made it easier for corporations to fire you, but doesn't mean it makes it easy for you to get a job. And so with these laws, more than 1,200 of those policy proposals that they gave to Reagan, they put in place. Other examples, you can go to the next one. Other examples of policies, if you ever remember back when they did TANF, the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, when they changed welfare as we know it under President Bill Clinton. This came from the Republican contract with America, which was another way. And so even though we say this is Donald Trump's plan, the reality is if the president is so inclined and of that viewpoint and they believe that something is there that they can use, there's no stopping that person. So these promises, everything in this plan is built on 4 promises. The very first promise is this one, that they're going to restore the family as the centerpiece of the American life and protect children. Sounds great in theory. Everybody wants a strong family, right? But then when we start to say that we want families to only look a certain way, man and woman, they have to be married. If they're not married, then there can be some penalties, or if we make them get married, it doesn't matter if there's been some issues like domestic violence or whatever, as long as it looks like what we want it to look like. The next one is dismantle the administrative state and return governance to the American people. Once again, we don't need the federal government to make sure that we have FEMA and other organizations out here helping us with these catastrophic hurricanes that are coming through. No, we don't need the NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which predicts and tells us what kind of path these storms are going to take. No, They say we can privatize this. We can shovel it off to private entities, and they can provide those services. Defend our nation's sovereignty, border, and bounty against threats. Once again, this is telling us that our borders are at risk by people coming in, and most times it's from the global south. But the reality is most folks who are undermining what's happening in our country are flying in from the Western European countries. And then secure our God-given individual rights to live freely. All that's a bunch of mumbo-jumbo to say we just don't have any kind of rules and regulations. It's lawlessness, and it's a problem. All right, the next one. So on these promises, they have 4 pillars that are very, very important for what they're doing. The very first pillar is they want to hire folks. Well, the organizations have come up with a consensus view of what our federal government should be, i.e. what they should think, how everyone should think, and then how everything should operate and function. And then how it's organized. That's very important because that means that the experts, now, I know a lot, but don't ask me to do any math. Don't ask me to discuss anything about quantum physics or how to put somebody on the moon or any of that stuff. Not my area. But there are career folks in the federal government who that's their job, right? They are trained scientists and they are trained professionals who know these things. Well, they want to move those out and put Bubba's best friend in. And that's the problem. You want to put people who aren't necessarily qualified for the work in the positions because of their status as a friend. They want to have this personnel database. This database would compile anybody who's interested in working in that particular administration would send in their resume, and they would be vetted. Well, if you don't meet the criteria, so if your child is coming out of school and they want to work for the federal government, and maybe they said something before about a particular type president. You know, they said, I don't believe in these laws or whatever. They would be vetted and then not allowed to work for their federal government. And remember, working in the civil service is one of those ways in which African Americans have traditionally been able to move up in the socioeconomic ladder. And they want to take away that avenue. Presidential Administration Training Academy, they have online things that's basically indoctrination, telling folks exactly what you should say, what you should think. Nobody thinks for themselves. You just follow along with what's being given. And lastly is on January 20, 2025, when the president utters the phrase, "So help me God," in the presidential oath of office, they are ready to move in and remove any type folks who are already directors within the federal government who are already working to ensure the work that our federal government is doing and to replace them with folks who are loyal to the conservative president. And so there's this loyalty test. There's this idea that we won't have a president that's elected by the people, but instead it will be somebody whose money has already bought, and then we have to fall in with what they're thinking. Next slide. And so what does this mean for our federal government? As we said, our 3 branches of government, or the checks and balances within our democracy are at risk. We're talking about concentrating power within the executive branch, weakening independent agencies such as the Federal Reserve and the Federal Communications Center, and propose to bring them under political controls. So every channel can be Fox News. You know what I mean? So make it easier for the president to fire government workers and allow religious organizations to discriminate against people they don't agree with. Another thing is advancing this agenda, but making sure that when they get rid of the administrative state, that no one is able to actually come back and undo that in a quick way. For folks out here in the rural areas, I think it's important to understand that we're talking about ensuring that in the rural areas that farmers aren't getting the assistance that they need, that we are eliminating subsidies like the agricultural risk coverage and reducing how farmers pay for crops. We're in South Carolina. You know, we still have crops and things here, and so they matter. and again, making these agencies smaller and less powerful. And so what we have right now is a plan or a mandate for changing our government as we know it. And subsequently, the end goal that I often see from this thing is that they also, some of their partners are trying to call for a constitutional convention, which would change the very U.S. Constitution as we know it. Right now, they have 28 of the required 34 states that are necessary for a constitutional convention to be called. And so with that, there are no rules for once it's called what has to be done. So we as people of color, as we listen to people talking about the largest domestic deportation program this country has ever seen, I don't know about you, but I've never been able to tell someone is Haitian just by looking at them. We all look alike. And so we have to be very, very careful about the efforts that are here. It's been a long game, and it started long before Reagan. But it's continuing, and we must be prepared to fight back. I don't think there are any more. Oh, the judicial system, I apologize. So for our judicial system, some of the things that they're looking at is, again, they're very sneaky in how they discuss things like civil rights in this particular document. So yes, things like freedom of speech and the ability to be able to speak out against what's happening, our voting rights and things of that nature, they don't lay out, yes, next, yeah, there it is. And so what they want to do is move the Department of Justice under the under the presidency, right? And then the president is able to weaponize justice against his enemies. You hear this every other day. I just want to be a dictator on day one. Or we have to worry about the police, the qualified immunity being broadened to the place where nothing can stop them from harming folks. And also this idea of invoking the Insurrection Act, of allowing the military troops to perform law enforcement, is something that, yeah, it's a concern when you have folks actively and openly talking about some of these very things as though it should matter. And so our Justice Department, again, to weaponize it against its own citizenry, as well as to weaponize it against people who are actual legal immigrants to this country, is something we all need to be concerned about. And again, it's not a new conversation. If you read some old historical newspapers, they were talking about how they could get rid of the immigrants and who were the immigrants that were problematic at that time. It's just continuing, because this is a document, this is a worldview that's built on three things. It is built on white supremacy. It is built on white Christian nationalism, which is very, very different from the Christianity we know and profess, and this belief in the erasure of the contributions of people of African descent from the annals of history. These are the things that it's built on. These are the things that have been woven into not just this document and the other 8 iterations of the mandate, but in all of the different policies and things that have been developed on the right since Reconstruction in this country. And so that's it. All right. Are there any questions? Was that too fast? Was that too much? Okay. Questions at the end? Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of speaking about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's education. But unfortunately, I'm speaking about what could be the demise of public education as we know it in this country. Dr. Elliott said something very striking. She said that they're very sneaky. This plan and this think tank that put together this document, very sneaky but strategic. And when I think of education, the first thing I think of when I think of this plan and the correlation between this plan and education is that they want to use our children and train them up so that from little ones they'll have that indoctrination of a conservative lifestyle and value. And I think of that scripture that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So I do believe that that is the premise for a lot of what this group is doing with this Project 2025. I only have 2 slides, but I'm going to speak a little bit about some of what I know is going to be very detrimental should this policy pass. Basically, fundamentally, it will restructure the public education system in this country. And if you know, there are 90% of the children in South Carolina attend public schools. This plan calls for the end of the Department of Education and Head Start program. If you know anything about the Department of Education, it is our federal department that serves as an oversight. The federal department, or the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, has some things in place to ensure that each state is equitable, or making sure that they have equitable policies for all children. Now, some of these policies, as we heard a little while ago from Dr. Elliott, are already in place, and we can see them if you just look at the news and look at what's going on in our schools right here in South Carolina. You can see the effects of Project 2025 already in existence. And when Josh comes up, he's going to really share some of those and enlighten you about a lot of those things that are already in place. And you may know, for example, the book bans. And you've probably heard about them on the news, and Dr. Elliott mentioned also the erasure of our history from textbooks, not only textbooks, but what teachers can teach. Right here in South Carolina, if teachers teach slavery in a way that is offensive to non-Black students, she can lose her job, or he can lose his job. It's just that serious, and those mandates are already in place. So we have to be careful as teachers of what we even teach in the classroom. So the history is distorted, and our culture is already being depleted from history books and the curriculum in South Carolina. Head Start program, and this is a program, if you know anything about Head Start, it helps our youngest children to be prepared for school. This is a program that's been federally funded for many years that helps our children so that when they start kindergarten, they have the literature, they have the vocabulary. They are starting on as equal ground as possible. And that's a part of the plan that they're trying to take away. So there would be no Head Start programs. I took a few notes because that I thought was very, very important from this plan. And it is a detailed plan, and it includes a proposal to phase out the $16 billion Title I funding program over the next 10 years. If you don't know what Title I is, it's a federally funded program that provides resources to schools with the greatest student needs. Guess where most of those communities are in our state and across our country? You're looking at students who look like us for the most part. The goal of Title I is to ensure that all children have access to a high-quality education. Schools that are part of Title I receive additional training, resources, and staffing to help students meet state education standards. Again, just look around our community. Here in Richland, this is still Richland County, but in Richland 1, there are 27 Title I schools. In Richland 2, there are 15, and in Fairfield County, there are 5 Title I schools. Those schools receive additional funding so that when students need interventions, or they need one-on-one assistance, or they need additional support staff, they need resources that children in more affluent communities already have that our children may not be able to afford or to receive outside of the school. Those $16 billion are distributed to schools around the country. Well, this plan calls for eliminating Title I funding. Dr. Elliott also mentioned taking away a lot of these federal protections and giving them to states. Well, if you notice, in the state of South Carolina, a lot of those rights have already been taken away. When you look at the meal programs, which is federally funded, a lot of our communities and our children receive subsidized meals. That means they get free or reduced meals. This plan is calling for the elimination of those meals as well. And over the past summer, this state was one of, I think, one or two states in the country who, or maybe the only one, that denied or declined the funding for the summer program for our children. Now, as a principal of a school, I served as principal in Myrtle Beach for many years, and assistant principal before that. I can tell you, I have seen children who take bags of food home every day because they know, especially on the weekends, that they may not get a meal until they come back to school. I see them go through those lines for breakfast and lunch and get their meals and eat every bit of it and ask for more because they know they're not going to get another hot meal. Can you imagine how that is going to be good for us and our children? But again, not only is it the programming and the funding, but also telling us and dictating to our communities what can be taught. To me, that is extremely dangerous when you're looking at only one segment. So that segment that Dr. Elliott talked about is that what that family looks like to the authors of this document. They're not families that look like ours. They have a particular pattern that they're going to be looking for, and those are the students who are going to be benefiting. When we talk about private schools and vouchers, that's something that we're already seeing and hearing about in the news right here in South Carolina. Charter schools where parents can send their children. And it sounds good when you have children who, and the federal government is going to say to you, or this plan is going to say, well, we're going to privatize education. So if your child is not doing so well in the public school, guess what? You can have a voucher to go to a private school, or you can have a voucher to go to this particular specialty school. Well, guess what? Those schools don't always, are not run by people who look like us. And I went to private school for a number of years in Charleston. I can tell you, they can decline or deny any student that they want. And that happens a lot. So if we don't fit their mold, we can have all the vouchers we want, but we're not even going to get into those schools because they don't want us, and they will have the right to do that. States' rights, we're seeing a big return of states' rights with this plan. States will have the rights to do whatever they want. We're already seeing that here in South Carolina when the governor is pushing for the state superintendent of education, which is a position that we vote for now as constituents, that he would appoint that person. So guess what kind of person they're going to, and if you know the history of our state, you can pretty much decide in your mind what that person is going to be like. And you can just look at the superintendent of education we currently have and the policies that have been passed, programs that have been implemented that do not benefit our community. Another very important piece is to remove funding for the yes, please, the next slide. For the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act regarding special education support in classrooms. Special education, a lot of our children, again, all you have to do is look at the data. When you look at the data, you're going to see a lot of African American students, males particularly, in special education programs. Some of them who personally I know do not belong in special education programs, but they're there. And imagine if there's no oversight, because right now every state has to report to the federal government each year the number of the demographics of students who are in special education, how many have been suspended, expelled. So you have districts now like mine in Myrtle Beach in Horry County that are telling principals, okay, we got to kind of not suspend the black children as much because we've got to report that to the federal government. Not that they think that that's the best thing for the child, but they don't want that report to go out and for them to look bad. Guess what? When there is no oversight from the federal government, do you think they're going to be saying the same thing? I can tell you now, no. Since I have retired as principal, I serve as an advocate. So I'm on the other side of the table now. I go with parents into special education meetings. And I can tell you, even within my own district, I have had to fight for the rights of children to get the things that they need. With no funding, those resources will not be there. Those students who need occupational therapy or physical therapy or counseling services that other communities have resources for or are able to get, a lot of our children depend on the schools to provide those resources for them. Those things will be eliminated. And the last piece I want to talk about is as we go into our college-age students, this plan calls for to end the prospect of student loan forgiveness. Now, if you've been following the news, you know that that's been something that the Biden administration has been very proud about, forgiving the loans of hundreds of thousands of students across this country, and rightfully so. There are students, I had teachers in my school who had been teaching for over 10 years and still paying their undergraduate student loan off, working 2 jobs. These teachers teach 8 hours a day, they plan, they go home and work, and then they leave and go to a hotel or restaurant in Myrtle Beach so that they can afford to pay the rent and to live comfortably. So just imagine our children who have $40,000, $50,000 loans that they have to pay back when they get out of college, paying on them for 10, 15, 20 years. So to me, there's a very little mercy, grace, and love in this plan. And again, I talked about the privatizing of schools. That's something that we really need to watch. Just because it looks good, like these charter schools and these private schools, please keep in mind that even now, they don't have the kinds of resources of public education. Public education has always been the equalizer, where when you have an education, it opens so many doors for you that have been closed, particularly to our community. And I can say to you as a 31-year veteran that if this plan is passed, it will be a detriment to our community above all others.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for being late. I need to leave home, what, an hour and a half sooner? Traffic. Okay, I'm coming from Augusta. Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide. Under the Department of Health and Human Services, Project 2025, and Dr. Elliott has touched a little bit on it, they will establish what marriage is, and you will be penalized if you don't fall into that specific category. So it's just a male and a female, and she mentioned regardless of abuse or any of that thing, but I think the part that I'm concerned about is when they say a young girl, let's say she's raped at 12, and so now she's pregnant. She has to get married. That's the law. That's what Project 2025 is. There's no sugarcoating it. That's what Project 2025 says. Once you're pregnant, you have to be married, and if you're not, then they will swiftly take that child away and put them up for adoption. Grandparents know you guys are out. Aunts and uncles and all of those family members that some of us grew up with, you know, you had, if you didn't have a dad around or you didn't have a mom around, there was always somebody there. Well, no longer. For Project 2025, it's about a husband and a wife. It's that Christian thing that they're trying to portray, but they've just went way off course with it. The other thing is, I believe the president is just that, the President of the United States. I'm prior service, and I was taught to respect the position. You respect that position. But the President is not your pastor. And so the President should not be making those things, those religious, those spiritual things about your life and how you live it. You talk to your pastor if you need guidance, and you go to God, not the President directing that. And with Project 2025, it is taking us to Russia, the way they live. It is taking us to North Korea. Think about it. What do they do in Russia and North Korea? They tell you when to wake up. It's like prison. When you wake up, when you go back to sleep, what you eat, what you watch on television, and all of that. Think about it. Do you want someone to tell you when you watch television and what you watch? In North Korea, they watch exactly what they are told to watch. That's the kind of life that we really don't want. So we're here to help you understand this, and do go to their site and read it and share the information, because this will impact whatever your lifestyle is. And that's their plan. They mandate that single parent is no longer legal. I grew up in a single parent home. It wasn't the best, but through God's grace, I'm here today. There's a lot of us that grew up in single parent home. We have young women who, because of, stuff happens, but that don't mean that you throw them away. They are still our babies, and the government should not be getting into family business. That's not their job. They will withdraw federal anti-discrimination laws or protection for transgender students. Now, you might think, well, just transgender. No. All discrimination stuff, you heard them, they talk about DEI. Anything that has to do with that, they will be removing it. We will have no rights. If you look like me, no rights. They will take that away. The police, they will have full reign. According to them, with this mass deportation, they can go into churches, your homes. They're just going to get rid of people. And with the conservative views, what they're saying, and they're saying it's for the Haitians, but as she said, can you look at the Haitian and look at one of us and say, okay, you're Asian? No, you can't. So when they go into your homes and they go into the schools and they go into the church, and, they're going to be taking some of us. And we're not from that country. They will be re-implementing, and this one is a little close to my heart. A prior service, I've served with veterans who are transgender, and while in the foxhole, I really didn't care what you were doing at home at night. As long as you know how to handle your weapon and you can protect me in that hole, that's all that matters. And that's what the president should be concerned with. Are these people able to protect the country? And they're out there risking their lives. I have lost friends who were transgender, protecting this country. But now, Project 2025 has put them aside. Somebody's daughter, somebody's son is no longer valuable to society, so they're taking away all the benefits that they earned while serving in the military. And believe me, once they go after them, they will go after us too. Now let's go to the next slide. Healthcare. We all need it. We all need some form of healthcare. Project 2025 is putting Medicare on a path to privatization. Can you believe that? These people sat down and thought about this. Now, a lot of us, once you get to a certain age, you're on a fixed income. You can't get up every day and go work 12 hours and 18 hours that we used to do back. Now I can barely handle 12. But I remember doing 24 and 18 hours in the military. But back to Medicare, you don't want to take that away, but that's their plan because they're thinking it's a waste for the government to be paying for this. So now, once it's privatized, then we have to pay for it. They are trying to target our people. They will repeal, and this one is really heart-wrenching. They will repeal the current Medicare drug price negotiation program. Forget the $35 insulin. As I was telling them, I took my mom's prescription when I first got it, and I'm like, yep, I'm gonna go pay for it, and the lady said about $6,800, and I said, no, I don't need it for the whole year. I just need it for 1 month. And she said, honey, that's for the month. And so I went back home and I needed all kinds of cards. What do you have? Blue, red, white, all the cards you have, we need to take it back because $6,500 a month. Can you imagine? And they just had a hearing in the House where they were talking to these billionaires. They are making billions and billions of dollars, these drug companies, and they're complaining. So we need to stand up for this, because if we don't, just think that you might be, getting your house up because you got to pay for medicine. You know how people were saying they had to get to the gas station to think gas, food, medicine, groceries. We don't want to go there. Let them keep bringing it down, negotiating these prices, so that people can pay at least $2,000 a year, I think, or even less. But don't take it away. And that's their plan. They want to take all of that away, and enough. We don't need that. The other thing is Medicaid. Medicaid are for our low income, our little ones. A lot of times I have a home care agency, and some of the young ladies that work for me, they can't afford to work the full-time job, pay the medical. Think about it, Blue Cross and Blue Shield is what, over $500 a month per family? And you have rent and all of this, and these are single parent. Medicaid help with those little ones getting to their doctor, they get their shots and all of that stuff. Project 2025 proposal is to get rid of that because they believe that is a waste. Anything to take care of us is a waste. Full in their pocket is all that matters. We need to spread this, let people know. This is the conservative playbook. And if you have any question on who is the relationship between Project 2025, and I'm not telling you how to vote, but look at Agenda 47. Agenda 47 is our former president's plan, and Project 2025, and put the two together. They're the same. Okay? Look at what is at stake. Let's go to the next slide. Reproductive rights. Planned Parenthood is not an abortion clinic, and that's all they do. Planned Parenthood is teaching young women, women, how to take care of their bodies and how to plan their pregnancies. You don't need to have 5, 6 babies at 20 and 22. You don't need that. You need to plan pregnancies so that you can still stay healthy. That's what they do. They teach you how to do that. They're taking that away. They're pushing it as though it's where babies get slaughtered. That's not the way it works. They are removing all of the funding. They are reversing the approval of abortion medication. At the age of 12, I was sold for a bottle of liquor at the age of 12. I ran. And I was grateful that I was able to escape that. But think about the young girls who don't get that opportunity to escape, and they end up pregnant. And now they're saying that that child has to. Just think about it. Your grandbabies, your little daughter, you know, the neighbor's little baby, 12. They might have a lot of mouth, but they're still kids. 13, 14, they might have a lot of mouth. Yeah, they'll give you lip, but they're still babies. They don't know how to raise a child. And sometimes I don't push abortion. I was a labor and delivery nurse for a long time. But sometimes you don't need to, to give satisfaction to the rapist, to bring that child into the world. You just don't need to have that kind of nonsense going on. But they're approving that stuff. They are evoking the shipment, 150-year-old Comstock law. So you can't transport the medication from one city to the next. They just don't want it happening. And they don't care. It doesn't matter. And we don't need that. We really don't need that. We need to be able to educate our young women and men, because it takes two to have the baby. We need to educate people on that, and they're taking all of that away. Next slide. Let's go to social service and housing. They are repealing the affirmatively furthering fair housing regulation. It's where people are allowed to get housing without the discrimination stuff. And now they're not allowing that, like the proposal. For first-time home buyers, you know, right now people get money. I think you get about $5,000 or so. But the new, what's her name, Vice President Harris, they're proposing, I think, $25,000. The Conservatives' plan is to get rid of that. Forget the first-time home buyers' help. They will be abandoning the single-parent housing. You know how these people, they help families because a lot of them, they just can't afford it. Everything is so high. The pay is down, and you know, you may get a 2% a year, but cost of living go up 10%. 2% don't do nothing. But you're still supposed to be able, and our young people paying student loan debt and everything else, it's too much. So they're getting some housing because they may have 5 or 6 kids and all of that stuff. And they're taking all of that away from them. Our seniors, they get assistance because you get those housing, retirement homes, housing where you get according to your income, so you don't pay all of that. They're taking all of that away. So we really need to pass this information on, that this is serious. It is not a joke. That's why they spent all this time to do it. And the plan was we were not going to read it. Because you know the saying, if you don't want black people to know, you put it in a book. And it kind of worked. But guess what? We're wiser now. Thank God, we're wiser. So now we can stand up and say enough. And enough is enough. And I don't think I have Department of Justice. Yeah. Yeah. So all I wanted to say is that pass this on. Pass on what you've learned. We didn't mention veterans, and I'll talk quick about the veterans. There it is. Veterans. They're cutting disability benefits. We have a lot of veterans because of what you've seen, and I've worked in healthcare all along while in the military. So we've seen stuff, we've done stuff, things that sometimes you ask your grandparents or so, and they won't talk about it. Both me and my husband, we have time where we both go into timeout because we're having that moment. And so we have veterans who have those moments. And it's not that we're crazy, but we have those moments, and we go to the VA because they understand us. They speak the language we speak, well, sometimes, but they speak the language we speak. And so, but the medicine that we can get, the care that we can get, these crazy folks are saying that that's a waste of money. And so they're trying to privatize the VA. Now that's a mess. You can't do that. So all my veterans, and if you know any veteran, please look at what's at stake when you get to that window and start voting. Please, please, please. The next thing is, with disability claims, they are limiting what you can claim. That's the proposal. So the PTSD stuff, like when a car backfire, you're trying to duck, they're going to be limiting a lot of that stuff. We don't need them touching anything. We need to be able to go to the VA and get care. Revoking the abortion-related care to veterans, a lot of our female veterans, and it's still happening, were raped serving. Think about it. And, you know, some people get into trouble, and it depends on who you're raped by. They might not get into trouble. You might get into trouble. But they're revoking that stuff. So you have to carry the baby and work on that crazy person. Please pass on what you've learned and let folks know that Project 2025 is no fun. We are not going back to slavery. We are moving forward, and we are a strong people. Thank you.
Before Josh comes up, remember, if you have any questions, raise your hand, and we'll have someone to give you a pad and a clipboard and a piece of paper to write your questions on. So we'll ask your questions after this. Come on, Josh.
Gwen, you mind if I walk around a bit? I've been sitting behind a computer all day. Evening. How we doing? Good. I don't like the name Project 2025. And I'll tell you why. Because I was fighting Project 2025 in 2021. And I'll be fighting Project 2025 in 2027. And my fear is that all of this education about Project 2025, there's this sense that there's one presidential candidate who will do a whole lot of harm at the federal level if he's elected. That's real. He will. There's another presidential candidate who won't do that harm at the federal level if she's elected. But what happens if she's elected? Now we've got a woke federal government, and you've got a state house that's going to be emboldened to work against the woke federal government. So like I said, I've been fighting Project 2025 since 2021. So I spent 5 years teaching middle school and high school math in New Orleans. So I spent a lot of my time in the educational equity space. So let me tell you what I've seen. No, let's play a game first. Let's play a game. All right. In South Carolina, across South Carolina, there is a process for a parent to challenge a book in a public school library. Every parent should have that right. I'm not against that at all. You disagree with a book, you follow the process, you challenge it. All right? We ready for the game? You're going to win. I think you're going to win. The 2020 to 2021 school year, how many challenges were filed across the state of South Carolina? Shout it out. 0? 100? Everyone's afraid. Don't be afraid. You're all going to be wrong. 20? 1,000? It was 0. Who said it? Was it you? It was 0. And my prediction is part of that was COVID, and kids were at home learning. And the second part of it is that this animus was really focused in on CRT and Black history. We did that. They tried to do that before they got to book bans. All right. Now we're at 2021, 2022. How many challenges were there? 500? Just 5. Okay, that's a smart guess. 1, 0, 0. You gonna go 2 for 2? 500? It was 8. 8. We still, Moms for Liberty still had not descended on South Carolina the way they're here now. 2022 to 2023. How many challenges? Less than 10? What was your guess? 10? Okay, interesting. 100? How many, sir? 0. 315. I taught high school math. That's nearly a 4,000% increase in one school year. Now, why? Why? 59% of those challenges have protagonists who are Black, brown, or queer. An overwhelming majority of those challenges feature sex and sexual violence. Knowledge is power. You take away knowledge, you take away power. They don't want students in South Carolina being able to see that children who look different, that children who love different, have to operate this world differently, have to navigate this world differently. Less prejudice, but equally as scary in my opinion. They don't want our young people having access to the knowledge of what is and is not a healthy or unhealthy sexual or romantic relationship. They don't want our young women knowing what consent is. If you don't know what consent is, you don't have the knowledge to report sexual violence in the same way. You can't report rape in the same way. Now, I will tell you, across South Carolina, where folks are challenging books, for the most part, we practice democracy. And groups of folks would get together and they would talk about the book and they would evaluate the book. And for the most part, folks understand that book bans are dangerous and books went back on shelves. So what happened? I wish they had stopped. Our superintendent, who goes to fly up to the Heritage Foundation, who are the primary authors of Project 2025, she issued a regulation that would ban books, any book with sex, genitalia, excretion, simulated excretion. Help me out with what simulated excretion is. For students of all ages. So if you are a deranged parent who is challenging books and you want to challenge Everybody Poops, Everybody Poops has excretion in it. That's the entire book. The entire book's excretion. That's a book about excretion. If someone went to the State Board of Ed and challenged Everybody Poops, no high school senior in South Carolina could check out Everybody Poops. Let's talk about what else our superintendent of ed has done. She took away AP African American Studies as an option for all students in South Carolina. When you take a course as an AP course, that gives you it's weighted differently, right? So for our highest achieving students, you want to be able to get the highest GPA possible. So if you want to take an honors African American Studies class, which is what our superintendent suggested, you're missing out on a chance to increase your GPA through an AP class. What'd she do next? Yeah, who is it? PragerU. Raise your hand if you're familiar with PragerU. Prager University is not a real university. It is a radical right-wing edutainment organization. And our superintendent entered into a relationship with them so that these videos, 3 to 5 minute videos, will be optional for all students in South Carolina. Keep in mind, these videos will be optional. What's not optional? AP African American Studies, that's not optional. You can't take that. What's not optional? Books with sex, sexual violence, excretion, simulated excretion, that's not optional. What's optional? A video saying that all of our founders were abolitionists. That's optional. A video that says the 3/5 compromise was abolitionist, was anti-slavery. That's optional. You could learn that. What's optional is Christopher Columbus says being a slave is better than being dead, right? That's optional. Our kids could watch that video. I really came to South Carolina after spending 5 years in New Orleans East, which is a community that could use a lot of help, wanting to fight for educational equity. You know, I got a sense of what all of the ways that society was failing my students, and, you know, I was hoping I could fight for change to systems so that my students would have more access to opportunities. And I think our education system should further that goal. Right? Think about if all of our students went to school, learned about how systemic inequalities and inequities have not stopped but evolved, and worked together to think about how to address them. Let me stop there and move on to the next step. A common theme through Project 2025 is the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, primarily equity, right? And what equity is the acknowledgement that we have forever systematically treated people unequally. You know, the radical right likes to say after Jim Crow ended, after the Civil Rights Act, everything was fine. But even then, our systems continue to operate unequally, right? We continue to have redlining. We continue to have exclusionary zoning. We continue to have exemption from the GI Bill, right? So we never came close to reaching racial equality. We never came close to reaching gender equality. And if we actually wanted to strive for equality, the solution is equity. So we can never, this is a systematic attack both on our students' knowledge and our adults on how our systems continue to operate unequally and inequitably so that we can never reach equality. Our veterans put their lives on the line and suffer psychological trauma. Our young people growing up in poverty and under-resourced neighborhoods suffer trauma. They need more in order to deal with their trauma and have the same access to opportunities. That's equity. That's equity. So the fact that not only are we erasing knowledge from our students so the next generation can't help fix these problems, but they're telling folks right now who are suffering the consequences of hundreds of years of unequal, inequitable systems, that's the goal. That's the goal. Where are we here? What can you do? Yeah, what to expect real quick. If Kamala, if President VP Harris or President Trump win, 2025 is here. Expect it. Expect attacks on librarians. Expect more criminalization of black youth. Expect greater control over women's bodies. Expect freedom to mean the freedom to discriminate. Expect discrimination to mean discrimination against white folks. Expect all those things. What can you do? Mobilize. Do what you're doing right now. Be informed. Don't think that if VP Harris wins, things are fine. That State House will be a rough place. Our State House could be rougher if VP Harris wins. So because and what else can you do? It is the easiest both to enact their agenda and protect civil rights the more local you get, right? So what can you do? You can go to your school board meetings. You can go to your library board meetings. You can go to your town council meetings. You can go to your county council meetings. If you sign up with the ACLU, we'll always invite you to Columbia, but if you're gonna meet with your legislators, do it here. Get some real time with them, because if you do it in Columbia, they're gonna give you 3 minutes, right? So set up time in your district to meet with them. And just because I got fussed at earlier today by my boss, it is very important to me that our organization is the people's organization. I don't believe that the 6 lobbyists who are in the State House really have the power to make change. I do believe getting information out to communities so that communities can advocate locally is the avenue to change. So please, my organization is extremely committed to not only getting State House information out to communities, but to getting our people out into communities, right? I have a 3-person advocacy team. All 3 of us are on the road almost all the time. So if you are part of another organization, you send me an email and one of us will be there. And I will also tell you, and we've touched on this, we've got a 3-person legal team as well. The law stopped mattering. The Constitution stopped mattering. We had cases on the books for decades that this Supreme Court just said, it's okay, we're overturning it. Just today, the Supreme Court said if you are a state that passed an abortion law that offers no protections, you're allowed to do that. Even though that interferes with federal law, you're allowed to do that. So anything they want to do where folks are like, where are the lawyers at? I agree. I never thought I'd say we need more lawyers. It would be nice. I'm not relying, that's not going to be our avenue. Our avenue is rooms like this, people like y'all, letting 3 of your friends know, 4 of your friends know, figuring out a schedule to get to your school board meetings, know who your school board candidates are. They infiltrated school boards like nobody else in 2022. Charleston did not expect Moms for Liberty to come in and take their school board, and they did just that. So if you got questions about a certain candidate, feel free to email me. I'm pretty good at speaking MAGA, so I can see their phrases and know what's up. So feel free to email me if you want to get some analysis on a candidate. Ooh, I had some more things. I got time? Okay, 2 more things. The legislative process is not meant for the people, right? They can let you know that a hearing is scheduled 24 hours in advance. They can then cancel that hearing. So you took the time to get off of work, and they decide, you know what, we're going to cancel that hearing. Even scarier, that's for bills, right? But even scarier is the budget process. The way they do the budget in South Carolina is impossible to interact with, even for experienced State House veterans. So anything that was talked about tonight that involves a loss of funding, Medicaid, EBT, Section 8 housing, that can all be done in the budget without any public oversight, without any public attention. I'll get notice maybe 45 minutes before it happens. The second thing is the fear, right? Because I will tell you, and I am not a God to uplift silver linings because it's not the way my head works. I'll tell you, because folks have mobilized across South Carolina, we still don't have a CRT law in the books. That first CRT law passed in 2021. It's 2024, and we still don't have it. A law criminalizing librarians that passed in other states. We don't have that. Attack on DEI. That bill didn't pass this year. So all the horrible things that we see passing in almost every state around us, that hasn't happened in South Carolina for the most part. But what does happen? The mere discussion of it creates fear. Creates fear creates fear in people I wish wouldn't be afraid, right? With the first time that the Freedom Caucus is the the 20 MAGA folks of the Republican Party who are not actually part of the Republican Party anymore, when they first started attacking DEI, unsuccessfully, University of South Carolina changed the name of their DEI office. Right now, you got school administrators, and these are folks who have been educators their entire lives. They're just pulling books off the shelves because they're afraid. Right, so even when they're not successful, even when they can't pass legislation, the fear that the discussion creates has the intended effect. I feel like I'm gonna stop there, but please give me some brownie points with my boss, and this would be a way to get information in the next few months and through the legislative session. Come scan the QR code and sign up with the ACLU. I promise you we will not spam you or ask you for money or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple other things. Are there any questions? No questions. Well, you guys did a phenomenal job. No questions. I'm going to give you a little more information, and you can, here we go. First of all, there is a couple of documents. I showed you guys a copy of the Project 2025 book, that 922 pages. You can go online, download it. You can also go online and get segments of it if you're interested in just the education part, whatever. There's another document here. It's called a project. It's a project by the Democratic Forward. It's called The People's Guide to Project 2025. This document is also available. You might want to go online and look at this as well. It is The People's Guide to Project 2025. And you go to their website. You can download it. It's about 40 pages. So this is out here as well. It's condensed down. It's very well for you to read. And then we have gone through some painstaking efforts to take that 922 pages, a document like this. We have plenty of them in the back for you to pass out, 2 sides. And so this was a project that I worked on, Nicole worked on. We got AI involved. We did everything we could to try to bring that 922 pages down to 2 pages. We want you to get a copy for yourself to understand what it says. Get a copy and share with other people in your family. Get a copy and make sure your young folk, your nieces and nephews, great nieces and nephews, children know what's in Project 2025. It is something that we're talking about a lot, but not enough. And a lot of people don't understand the implications, or they have said things like, that's just talk. It's not that bad, but read it. Or, that's just something somebody wrote up. It's not going to happen. No one spends this many years working on a project with 922 pages, don't plan to use it. And more importantly, we know it's already happening. It's happening right now. We're seeing it. So this is no time to play. This is no time for jokes. So we're not trying to scare anybody. We just want to inform folk. And so we and our partners, we thank you guys. You are our partners as well to try to get this information out to everybody. So if there are no other questions, I think my panelists, you guys, great panelists, right? They have traveled to come, Augusta, Myrtle Beach, and Crosstown to get here. They have traveled. And I got to say, they have doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. We're a nonprofit organization, and they are not charging me for their service to come and spend their gas and time and effort to come. So we really do appreciate it. These are people who really care about what we're doing, so I want to thank you guys for that. I want to thank also Reverend Bess for saying, come on over here and do this here. We want you guys to come. He didn't have to. And so many people don't think about it, but it's a charge to open the building up. It costs some money to clean the building. It costs some money to get the staff back here to do the VA equipment. I thank them back there because they were on. They called me early. Where's my stuff? I had to send it to them early. Where's my stuff? Yeah. So I think the guys back there who are doing the audio vision, working in the office of the secretary of the church, and everybody who's been supportive in this effort, thank you so much. Reverend Bess, you want to give us a prayer out? Or say any full closing comments? Mm-hmm.
Let us stand. What a beautiful night. Thank you all for coming to share with us. We have a great responsibility. It fell in good soil. God will be glorified by what we do with what was planted tonight. There's much work, but we have to remember that God is in full control. Let us do our part. Sister Singletary, thank you for thinking of us. And we thank you. We'll be talking soon. Let us pray. God in heaven, thank you again for what we have heard. Thank you for what was planted in our spirit for information. Now allow your spirit to allow it to manifest, that we will become more knowledgeable as to what to do next. Give us the tools we need based on the information given, that we may do that which honors you and that you might be glorified. Motivate us continuously towards the greater good of your people. We thank you, God, for the labor of love given by this panel, the passion that came from what they've said. We honor them on this night. We ask for you continually to provide them with covering as they seek to deliver the message of information, that your people might be educated, that we might grow, and that we will not be lost because of a lack of knowledge. Do only what you can do. We thank you and we cover you now. Cover these your people as they shall travel home. Provide grace and mercy to them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now tell your neighbors that this is online so they can go back and look at it at any point in time, those that may not have been here. Thank you all. Come scan the barcode so Josh can get some good credit, right?